Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, get to chat to some of the leading lights and interesting figures in this business we have of writing, self-publishing, and not just self-publishing, because today we have a very special guest who took a traditional route, and we are here to find out all about her writing journey. So, Michelle Paris, we are delighted to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Roland and Craig, for having me. Thank you.
Oh, well, we are very excited to have you here. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
Great. Thanks, Roland. Thanks, Michelle. Welcome to the show. Yeah, you as Roland said, you went sort of the traditional route. You've just came out with your second book now. But, sorry, you're shaking your head. Is it not? You just have one, but the second one's about to come out. Right. Okay. So, but what I'd like to, what we wanted to sort of talk about is sort of the journey that brought you to publishing and the decisions that went into going the trad pub route, because I know you had thought about self-pub, right? So that's one of those topics that, never really gets old, because I think that we always everybody has their own story, everybody has their own path. And I love to hear the different paths, because it really helps to show people how there are many different paths. And sometimes when they hear one that's even a little bit closer to theirs than another one they heard, then it just helps, them feel better about what the decisions they've made, or help them make some decisions sometimes, right? So, because certainly there's not one path to success. And although we are all about the self-publishing here, we're certainly not, saying nobody should ever traditionally publish. There's definitely always reasons to do that. And I mean, if somebody came along and wanted to traditionally publish a book of mine, I mean, maybe I'd do it, maybe I wouldn't. I'd have to hear the terms. But anyway, so let's start with you then. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and that first book that you got, and sort of how things got started?
Well, sure. I'd be happy to. So my book, New Normal, launched on May 2nd, and it's loosely based on my own life. I was widowed suddenly at the age of 40, and I wanted to put my thoughts into, I write better than I speak, and I wanted to put my thoughts into words, because I was dealing with a lot. And so I first started a journal, and then eventually I thought, you know what, this might make a good story. And what I like to read are lighthearted women's fiction books. And when my husband died, I couldn't find any characters where the main heroine was widowed. Most of them in middle life were divorced. And so I decided to write the story that I knew very well. It was loosely based on my own life, and all the pitfalls of having to go back in the dating pool when you're 40 and you have a little bit of baggage, because everybody does. And but mostly I wanted to write a happy ending for myself, because I couldn't see far enough in the future, and this way I could have a little bit of fun.
It's funny. We just did a podcast talking about how writing can be such a therapeutic thing for people struggling with stuff. We spoke to the wonderful author Amy Ziegler, who'd worked through her own postpartum depression through writing, and then listening to this is fascinating. When my brother died, I wrote a whole book that was kind of processing the emotions for that, and it's an amazingly therapeutic thing. But people, what has the reaction been from readers? Because I imagine there are things that resonate really strongly. You wrote the book that you were looking for.
Yes, and I will say the question I get asked most is, well, what part is real and what part is from your imagination? And that's my best kept secret, right? I did not write a memoir for a reason, because I first of all thought I had a boring life, and second of all, I was afraid of being too exposing, right? I think writing is exposure enough. I mean, you're putting your thoughts and your heart out into the world, and It's a really terrifying thing to do. So I didn't want to compound that with having it be a true to life story. But I agree with you, Roland. It was so therapeutic. It even to this day, now my husband's been dead for 19 years, but I can still read passages in my novel that actually happened to me, and it'll evoke emotions.
I mean that's the crazy thing when you read books, especially about people who might have passed on. You know, you're keeping them alive. You're keeping their memory of them alive through your words, which will hopefully live on long beyond you do.
Yes, yes, yes. And I hope my book resonates with people. I do know a few people who have been widowed, and I've given them copies of the book because that was its true intent, was to help people grieve and to help people move on. What I really wanted when my husband died was I wanted someone to say, you know, everything's going to be okay. You're going to look back years from now and go, wow, that was really hard, but I'm in an okay place. And that's what I want to be for people. I want people to have that reassurance when they read the story.
And sort of reading the reviews for the book, it's like the top review is like how it's incredibly relatable. It hits you right in the feelings. There's another one about how the reader felt so many emotions while reading this book. So it seems like what you were channeling resonated with people who read it.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so. And that has been, you know, I went through imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of writers go through. And when I got the first good review, it really solidified my thinking and my confidence because, you know, it's one thing for your friends to tell you, oh, you wrote a great book, right? They have to tell you that, but strangers don't have to tell you that.
Exactly. And they won't. If they don't like it, they'll tell you that. But listen, you have 10 reviews and an average of 4.8, which is absolutely great. You know, no imposter here. You're the real deal.
Right. Well, yeah, and your book's just come out as well.
Yes.
May 2nd, you published it. Yep. And that was with that's a traditionally published book as well, isn't it? It's Loyola.
Yes, it's with Apprentice House, and the unique thing about Apprentice House is it's a student-run press. So students learn the publishing industry, and they do it soup to nuts. They do acquisitions all the way to the print book, and I have a really emotionally positive feeling about them because I am going to be 60 in September, and these students have helped me realize my dream.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Awesome. Now, how did that come about? Because I mean, we tend to focus on self-publishing, which we think is great, but we sometimes talk to people who've gone the traditional route. How did you take this route? Because I mean, Apprentice House is different to like going with Penguin or something like that. But you know, all of the bits seem to have come together so tightly. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so my publishing journey was very, very long. It took me probably 15 years to get the book into a form that I was proud and didn't want to change a word or any edits at all. But that was a long path, right? I took a novel writing class at our local community college, and I met 3 other writers, and we formed a critique group. And so we started meeting monthly, and we would give feedback to each other's work, and that made me accountable. So I don't think I would have finished the novel if I didn't know every Tuesday, every once a month on Tuesday, I was going to have to turn in something and receive feedback. And it was a real encouraging and trusting environment. So that was helpful too. We all wrote different genres, so there was no competition going on. And so I started the traditional route when I thought I had a good product, and I queried, probably close to 60 agents.
Wow.
And I got a positive response, I have to say. I probably got about 12 to 15 full requests. So I knew I was on to something, right? Like I knew that I had a compelling story because I would make it past the first gate. But I would take their feedback because at times the feedback was it's just not a good fit or it wasn't funny enough. I had someone tell me that. And I would look at the manuscript again and either make edits or not. And the rest of the members of my group have self-published. And so I have to say one of the reasons I hadn't was I was terrified by the process, right? Like I know you can buy books on it. And I know all about Kindle Direct. I read everything you could about it, but I was terrified. I was terrified to hit the button and put it out there. And I honestly can't explain why. I got it. It's terrifying, right? Like,
yeah. And listen, if you've never done it before and you're taking this piece of work that is a lot of you, that you put a lot of your time and effort into, that you identify as a piece of yourself, right? Writing is very raw sometimes, right? And then and you don't know anything about how the whole process works. I'm sure it's like, you're going to hit publish and screw it all up and, do something wrong and everything will be messed. And it's just so much easier if somebody's saying to you, hey, just give it to us. We'll do it all for you. I completely understand that.
it was all that fear and everything. I got an ISBN number. I had a cover design. I mean, I was literally just a click away from being a self-published author. And I wanted to do it right. And I know marketing is a big chunk of the process. So I researched that as well. And I reached out to a publicist on Reedsy. And, she was very frank about we don't take on self-published authors. And it was a little gloomy of a perspective, the whole you can expect to sell 10 books and those are only to your friends kind of thing. But she said, have you thought about sending it to a small press? And I went, oh, well, yeah, okay, let me exhaust that option first. And that's what I ended up doing. And so I sent the manuscript to about 10 small presses, and Apprentice House said they loved it. So that's why we're here.
Well, I mean, I think that's a pessimistic view of self-publishing, because obviously you can be successful in self-publishing.
I think, and one of my writers group partners is very successful. She does the Amazon ads. And I even took the Amazon ad class. I mean, I was, as I tell you, I was very, very close to doing it. I was just intimidated by the process. And so I know you can have success as a self-published author. And I see it every day with the people I surround myself with. I just have to say I was afraid of the process.
Well, I think there's something to be said for you can be a writer, but to be a successful self-published author, you also have to be a publisher. And sometimes people don't want to do that.
It's a business.
It is a business. And also, like my personal experience, I published 11 books before I had my first bestseller. So it's like you have your book, which is important to you. You want people to read it and you want to get it right first time. I think in self-publishing, it is impossible to get it right first time. So yes, I can definitely see the appeal of wanting to go the traditional route for something that
I don't even think in self-publishing, it's, I think in traditional publishing, it's hard to get it right the first time, right? Like I look at my book now that it's out and I go, oh gosh, I would have changed this and I would have changed that. But I'm learning as I go. And I've also learned that the arcs are critical. And I think they're critical for everyone, right? It doesn't matter if you're traditional or self-publisher. It really will boost your sales if you can get an advance copy in people's hands and give the book away and create a buzz around the launch day.
Yeah, I mean, reviews are really important from the sense of, showing people it's always like that social proof, right? That other people have read it and other people have enjoyed it. Because when they're looking, especially at a new author, trying to decide, should I take that chance? If nobody else has left a review, it's such a gamble in some people's minds to spend not just their money but their time on something that maybe was written by ChatGPT. They don't know.
Right.
So yeah, no, I agree. And you don't need a ton of reviews, but even just having a few, if somebody's looking at two different books and trying to decide between them, and one doesn't have reviews and one does, often they'll choose the one that does have reviews. I mean, unless they're terrible reviews, but yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who reads reviews for everything, and so they matter. They do matter.
And you don't listen. I mean, it's important to get, we're saying about you're not going to probably get the first book right in terms of the marketing and hitting the ground running and all that stuff, regardless of self-published or traditionally published. But it doesn't really matter, right? Because if it's a great book and you're going to continue writing, if your success comes in a few years after book 3, after book 4, people will still find that first book.
Yeah, right. Right.
I go back and I read. If I discover a new author that I like, I'll go back and read their older books. I mean, obviously, to me, it's like a gold mine. It's even better, right?
Yeah.
Because then it's like they have all these other books they get to read.
Yeah, I had someone recently say to me, "Oh, well, after launch, then you don't sell any more books." And I said, "Oh no, that's not true. Most of the books I read are not new, right? Most of the books I read have been out for several years, and it's either I stumbled on them as an author in the genre that I like to read, or someone's referred them to me."
That is interesting. I've noticed when I publish a new book, I normally have that, that book sells a lot of copies, but the first book in my series sells equally as many copies when I publish each new book.
Right. Yes.
So once you decided, the small press route, what did you do? Did you send it out to, was this the first one you contacted?
No, I sent it out simultaneously to about 10 small presses. And so that was the fall of 2021. And slowly rejections came in, okay, being 100% transparent. And the rejections sting, okay, they never get easy. But I just persevered, and because Apprentice House is tied to a academic calendar, their decision process was in the spring of 2022. And I remember when I got the email, I have a Apple Watch, and so I get emails and read them when they come in, and I thought, here's another rejection, right? And I had to read it a couple times to realize it was not a rejection. And it was validation, and it was just this feeling of a decade-long dream, right? I had been thinking about first writing a book ever since I was a young woman, and then publishing. So it was like it was just the greatest feeling. It really was.
That's wonderful.
It's funny too that you say that it was kind of the fear of self-publishing that kept you from pushing that button, right? But on the flip side, a lot of what keeps people from going the trad pub route, and myself included, it was that fear of rejection, right? Yeah. The fear that you're going to send your book out, like with self-publishing, there's no fear of rejection. Amazon take whatever you want, right? So you hit publish and there's no rejection at all. I mean, sure, maybe people won't buy it, but you can have lots of reasons why that was the case. It wasn't my book that was bad. I'm not a good marketer, or whatever. But when you send your book out to a traditional publisher and they reject it, that hurts. And that's a feeling that I think a lot of people just choose to avoid by going the self-publishing route. And so you kind of went that way knowing that you're going to have.
Well, here's the thing, right? I had to reinvent myself when my husband died. I look at my life in two segments, before and after. And dating when I was in my 40s, I had to deal with a lot of rejection. Okay. And so I won't say I got good at rejection. I got better at rejection. And I could normally find something positive in some of the rejections I got from literary agents. Sometimes it was I could equate it very easily to online dating. Like, gosh, this person looks so perfect. This agent represents my genre. She's looking for something that'll make her laugh and cry. Oh my God, she's going to love my book. And she rejects it, right? So I would say that I would allow myself to be upset. And if I wanted to eat ice cream, I ate ice cream, or whatever I needed to pull my pants up and move on, I would do. But I wasn't, it definitely stung, I will say that. And it would knock me down for a little bit, but I would always get back up. I believed enough in my story that I could do it.
That's great. Yeah, the self-confidence, and which is, I think, the most important thing for that. Sure.
Yeah.
So you've got another book. You're already. I mean, what's your plan now? You've done it once. What's your plan as an author?
Yeah. Wow. So the contract I signed with Apprentice House, they got the first right of refusal for my next book. So I turned it in, and I was really, really hoping they wanted it too, and they did. So the way the process works for them, it's like a year-long process, and we just finished developmental edits last week, actually. So I was launching my first book and working on my second book, and sometimes the characters would get mixed up in my head, and the story would get mixed up too. So I don't recommend that, I will say that. And then in the fall, we'll design the cover, and it's a collaborative effort. They take my input. And I expect to have some arcs maybe in January.
So that, that sort of takes me back to the first book and a few questions I have around, that process, because I know you mentioned that before you went the small press route, I think you said you got it edited and you got a cover made and all that stuff, right? But when you signed with them, I imagine they still want to do their own edit, which is understandable. They probably also wanted to create their own cover, right?
Yeah, so they took my input on the cover, and I was allowed to reject the first couple covers they came back with because I just didn't feel like it fit what I was looking for. What I told the artist was I wanted the cover to depict the main character's new life as being chaotic but sweet. And so there's the character adopts a dog, and the dog plays a big role in the book. And so the artist came up with the idea of, oh, let's feature the dog. And I said, I love it. I just love it. So once we agreed on sort of the theme for the cover, then the iterations were really simplified after that. It was just basically color and the font for the words and stuff like that. So.
The cover looks it's interesting. Will you go on about how important covers are? Covers are almost like a dress code. At the moment, drawn covers like yours are a really solid staple of like the kind of cleaner, kind of more wholesome type romance thing. So your publisher picked a very, very congruent cover that looks like it belongs in amongst all of the
and it
romantic
conveys
books.
It's a lighthearted story, and I wanted that to be the case. And I do remember early on meeting with the publisher, and they said, we will listen to your input, but we are the professionals, and you have to kind of keep that in mind. And I couldn't be happier with what the end product came out to be. As far as edits are concerned, they made minor suggestions, because by the time I had sent it to them, as I said, I didn't want to do too much developmental editing to it. I didn't think it needed it, first of all, and I wouldn't have been down for like a total R&R. There's just no way I would have done that. So I was glad that the suggestions they made were more for clarity purposes. Like when they read through it, they would say this isn't clear enough. We know what you're trying to do, but this isn't clear enough, and just little tweaks here and there. So I was grateful for that too.
You said the book took you sort of 15 years in publishing. If you don't mind me asking, your husband passed away 19 years ago. When did you start writing, and what was the process of writing your book like?
Okay, so I kept a journal after he died. I went to grief counseling right away, and a therapist suggested that I keep a journal, and so I started that way. It was more of a like a diary kind of thing, and then I'm sure you guys are like this too. I'm always writing in my head, right?
Yes.
Doing the laundry, I'm writing in my head. If I'm at the grocery store, I'm writing on the way to the grocery store, writing. And so
in the shower,
everywhere. I mean, I'm just always thinking about scenes and characters, and especially once I have a first draft, right? Like then it's always about tweaking and making it better, and making sure that it's believable, right? And I can't watch a movie without wanting to rewrite the script. It's just something I have inside of me. So that's sort of how the process started. After I took the novel writing class, then I started doing chapters. And it took me probably 3 years to get a really, really rough draft. And then I had to go back and take the feedback that I received from my critique group and input that. And I thought I had written the next bestseller, and I'm saying that sarcastically. And I sent it out to an editor who gave me 16 pages of feedback, right? So I put it on the shelf for probably a year, 18 months, because the feedback was too painful to hear, but the feedback was right. And I had to wait until I was ready to deal with the feedback. And so then I went back to the story, and the story kept calling me back, right? Like the characters did, the story arc did. And so I just kept going back to it and going, I am going to do this. I am going to do this.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, and I think that's normal. A lot of people will just put the first draft away for a period of time, even before they get to edits, just to give it time in their minds. But certainly, the idea that getting those edits back is sometimes tough.
Yeah.
And it's worse, I'm sure, with a story that's super personal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's very, very common that people will. They'll see those and they'll just like, it doesn't mean they're not right, but it still kind of, hurts. And
yeah,
that's fine. But with the new book though, you didn't go through all that process, right? So you did all those things, and that's why they didn't really need to do a lot of editing. I'm sure because you already did it. But
with the new book, I wrote it after I finished New Normal. And I did send it out to an editor that I use, and she gave me some feedback. And it probably took me maybe 2 years to get it to a point where I felt comfortable and proud of it. And so they sent me back some edits, as I said last week, just finished them. And some of the edits I didn't necessarily agree with this time. And some of the other edits I think made the story stronger. So
well, that's always a good thing. I think one of the most important things for a writer to be successful is to be able to take from feedback the valuable stuff, but also disregard the stuff that's less valuable. I mean, some people might not like things, and sometimes the bits that you leave in that your editor told you not to are the things that make your book special to other people.
I think you're absolutely right. Really, really stand by some of my stuff.
Well, in terms of like the marketing side of it, what does the small press do for you around all that, and what do they expect you to do for?
They expect the writer to do a lot of the marketing. And so I had all the research I had done when I was planning to self-publish. And so I sent them a marketing plan, and they added to it. So they had like podcasts, and they had contacts at the local paper. And I have a background in public relations, so I was familiar with the press releases and stuff like that. And I luckily have a friend who is still in PR, and so she got me on a feature story in the local Baltimore Sun, and she got me on the Channel 2 News and on the NPR radio station. So I think what helped with my book was there was the personal hook, and the whole bit about wanting to help people deal with grief. So that was
so they gave you a marketing plan saying, but not like the actual execution. That was up to you. They were like, go on podcast, go do interviews.
Yeah. So they did volunteer student to help with the marketing, and I waved them off. I go, I think I got this. And I do know some of there in the cohort, there were 25 books that they published this spring. And I do have a friend who wrote a memoir, and she hired a PR firm to the tune of like 20 grand to promote her book. And my book was promoted more than hers. Okay.
Oh, well, that's, I mean, it's funny. There's this intangible, and this je ne sais quoi that works for some books and doesn't for others.
I think if I didn't have the personal hook or the grief angle, I think my second book is going to be much harder to promote. It's just a traditional rom-com kind of book that doesn't have the personal element. But I'm hoping that having two books out there, as you said, people will go back to the first book and build on my audience that way.
I mean, that's how it works. You think even J.K. Rowling didn't, she didn't become big until she'd written 3 or 4 books, and then everyone.
I actually have that scenario in my first book, because the main character quits her job to write a book. I did not quit my job, by the way. And so someone tells her, "Do you think J.K. Rowling knew she was going to be J.K. Rowling before she became J.K. Rowling?" So yes, I agree with you. Everyone has to start somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. I did quit my job to write, but I went on a leave of absence actually in this. But yeah, like, I mean, what I guess, one of the things that always sort of bothers me about how traditionally published books nowadays are working is the idea that, they are expecting you to do all of this stuff, and yet they're still taking their big percentage.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It really is very similar to self-publishing, that you have to market your book when you go with a small press. You've got that absolutely right. I feel
Apprentice.
I
was just going to say, Apprentice House sounds like a really nice place to have your book published with, and it's almost closer to self-publishing than
I agree. It's been a great process, and for me, it was just it was kind of validating, right? Like I as I said, I had that imposter syndrome, and I thought my writing isn't good enough. And then once they accepted it, I went, oh wow, okay, yay.
Yeah, and I'm not saying anything about this particular, publishing house. I think they're all sort of working this way now. I guess my problem is that, they're still taking, most of the money, and then giving the author a very small part of it. And I sometimes fail to see what the benefit is that they're delivering, other than we could get you into bookstores.
No, there's that benefit. The other benefit is I didn't. For my second book, I won't have to pay for a cover. I won't have to pay to have it formatted. All of those things come with
but those are fixed costs, right? And you recoup those costs by the fact that you get 65% of your money, as opposed to, I don't know what percentage you're making, but I'm assuming far less than that, right?
It is less than that, and the contract is tiered. So once you sell a certain number of books, they give you more of a percentage.
Well, that's good. That's good, at least. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm sort of jaded. I kind of feel like it is nice. I mean, sure, I would have loved to like walk into a bookstore and see one of my books, but I didn't want it that much that I was willing to give up, all of the other stuff. And I think, to me personally, it would have been less motivated. I would have been less motivated to put a lot of time, effort, and expense into marketing a book that was going to make someone else richer than it was going to make.
Well, here's the thing about my publisher is they're not out to make a profit, right? They're out to teach students the process. So it's a little different. They're very open to handing out copies, right? They give copies to all the libraries. So it's a little different than the for-profit.
Right. I like that a lot because it's publishing has evolved and changed so much in the last few years, and it's kind of something like that enables young people to bring in their new perspective on how to be successful with the stuff that you can't replicate. Because I mean, Craig and I, we've been in this business for such a long time, and as successful as you can be, there are obstacles like how do you get your book at a bookstore? And for a self-published author, that's really, really difficult. I mean, I've been talking to like supermarket chains where you can buy 200 copies and maybe they'll sell them, maybe they won't. And it's like the traditional publishers have that kind of buttoned up. And that's one of the things. Now, places like Apprentice House, they really are opening up and expanding publishing to a new generation who might revolutionize the industry just like self-publishing did.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's unfortunate that bookstores don't promote local authors. I wish that it wasn't. I wish it was easier for people to get their books into bookstores.
Yeah, I remember we had, I don't remember if it was on the podcast or if I had talked to an author about it separately, but one author that I spoke to was talking about how she took a whole bunch of copies herself to Costco and got Costco to actually take her book and put it on, in the middle where they put the books. And I think it even, did a good sell through, but then her publisher just didn't want her to keep doing it for some reason. I can't remember why. And it just seemed so, it didn't make any sense to me. And I was just, but if you're having a good experience with them and you're happy enough to, sign up again for a second book, then that's great. And like we said at the beginning, there's no one path to success. Everybody's going to find their way and what works for them. And I think that, what this is working for you, you're happy with it. And it might be something else that something that other people will also be happy with. A lot of people probably are in that same situation where they want to get it published, but they don't want the headache of all the other stuff. Yeah. And so they just want to take it, and maybe a small press like this. And we've had a couple small press publishers on the podcast as well, talking about sort of that process. Maybe that is better for them. And I think different small presses do different things for people. I think it's great that yours is doing, they're trying to teach their students how to go through the publishing process and all that stuff. That's great. Yeah, that's kind of their hook.
Yeah. I've been pleased with the process, I have to say. And it's taught me about the process too, right? As I said earlier, I had this immense fear. I really did. But I know what to expect with book 2. And I also think if I ever do decide to self-publish, I know the business a lot more too, right? So it's just given me a foundation.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be a hard transition for you, I don't think, because you actually did all those other things before you signed with them, right? You had your cover done and you had your editing done and all that stuff, and all you really did have to do was hit publish, and then you would have still done all your marketing. You just wouldn't have been in the bookstores. How have you been selling a lot of books in bookstores?
I did a signing at Barnes and Noble the weekend after the book launch, and it sold out actually.
That's great.
The one thing I don't have a lot of information on yet is how many books are being sold. Apprentice House is putting together a dashboard, so eventually we'll be able to have real-time data on that, but they don't have that yet. And the other thing I'm going to say, in full transparency, like I don't get my royalty check until April of next year. So it's not like instantaneous, you sell a book, you get a royalty check. I have to wait a year for that.
Well, even Amazon, you get it's lags behind sales as well, right?
60 days up to month's end.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
To me, like the people listening to this, hopefully there are going to be, we have people all in all different stages of publishing, and hopefully there are going to be lots of people who maybe haven't pulled the trigger yet. They've had that same like paralysis, and this is a different route you could take, finding an independent publisher, because we've had podcasts before where we've talked about, if you don't want to do it all yourself, traditional publishing is one option, but an independent publisher, a small publisher these days, can bring you the best of both worlds in a certain way. And there are disadvantages. Like for me, I love being able to access all of my sales data instantly at the same. But then again, I wrote 11 books that failed before I had my first bestseller. So I spend a lot of time and a lot of money getting to the stage where that information is useful to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a learn as you go process, isn't it? And everything changes. And now with ChatGPT and everything, I worry how that's going to impact writers. I've been terrified of that. Here I am. I will tell you one funny story now. As I said, I'm going to be 60 in September, and my very first job at a PR firm, they had a fax machine. And I remember being terrified of the fax machine. So, I eventually get over my fears and
so you have a good history of being scared of technology. That's right.
Right. I totally do.
Well, ChatGPT is scarier than a fax machine for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think that we're at the stage yet where it's going to replace writers. And I've said this before, that I think it's going to be the writers that embrace the technology and learn to work with it are going to have the advantage over the authors that sort of bury their head in their sand or fight back against it, because and I think that's going to be sort of the push and the pull is going to be not going to be between authors and ChatGPT. It'll be between authors and authors that use ChatGPT. You're going to give yourself a leg up.
I hope you're right. I just worried that publishers will go, we can crank out a book in 10 minutes, and it takes you 2 years to write it, right?
I don't think it can. How could you write a book, a widow entering a dating pool in her early 40s? How could you write a book authentically? How could an AI write a book like that? It can't. Yeah. It can churn out stuff, but I think the stuff that emotionally resonates with people, I don't think AI is ever going to be able to do that to the same degree. And if it does, then we're all screwed.
And really, what are they saving, right? Like you're saying, we can get a book in 2 minutes.
No, they're not.
But they're the ones that are taking a year to publish it. You already gave them your book, and they can't publish it for a year. Who's the bottleneck? It's not you.
Right.
They have manuscripts coming in all the time. They don't have to wait for an author to write another book. They just get another manuscript from another author, and they're the ones that are taking a year to do it. So, and they're not paying the authors much of the money anyways. So, saving it on ChatGPT, I don't think would really do much. So I'm not that concerned about that. I think that, we'll find ways to work with it and to help us improve. You might be able to not have to pay as much to your editors because you can do a first pass through, some kind of AI, that kind of thing. But that'll just save you money. And, not that all editors are going to be out of business, right? But I certainly wouldn't say that you should only get it done through that, but their jobs might get easier too, because they might still have to do a full edit of a book, but it'll be just cleaner because they first ran it through ChatGPT. Who knows, right? There's ways that I think that it's not really. Maybe one day we'll have to worry about it from that perspective, but I think it'll probably take over the world long before it would take over writing.
I'm nice to my
We'll have to watch.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we have to wrap this up. But Michelle, it's been so delightful speaking to you.
It's been
And
great.
hopefully lots of people listening to this find what you've said and your story really, really inspirational.
I appreciate the time, and it was nice chatting with the two of you.
So before we wrap up, where can people find New Normal and what you're working on next?
So they can find New Normal at Amazon or Walmart, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, and Target. And my next book will come out next spring. My website is www.michelleparisauthor.com.
That is wonderful. We'll make sure to drop a link down below. Craig, do you have any final words before we wrap up?
I don't. Well, actually, I am going to say one thing. Always believe in yourself and your story. That's the best advice I can give writers.
That's fantastic advice.
Great advice. And normally I would say, if you had to do it all over again, would you go the same route? But we already know, since you've signed up for a second book with them, that you would. So that answers that, right? So thanks again for coming on and chatting with us. I think it'll be really helpful for people to hear your story.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And yes, to everyone watching this, if you have enjoyed what Michelle has to say, make sure you let her know. Drop a comment down in the comment section down below. While you're down there, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, click that bell icon for notifications of every episode of Fully Booked when they come up. And we'll be back next week with another episode. So until then, stay tuned.